June 1, 1983. The streets of Louisville, Kentucky, were alive with the sounds of summer, families out for an evening stroll, children laughing, and the soft hum of chatter spilling out from the Bashford Manor Mall. 12-year-old and Gotlib was among those out that evening. Just a quick trip, a short ride on her bicycle to a place she knew well. But somewhere between 5:30 and 6 p.m., and vanished. Her red bicycle was found hours later, resting outside Bacon's department store. It sat undisturbed, its frame glinting faintly under the mall's fluorescent lights. The mall grew quieter as the evening wore on, yet there was no sign of Anne. The bike wasn't just a mode of transport, it was a mark of innocence, a child's freedom to explore her world. Yet it became the only clue in a mystery that would grip the city, and the nation, for decades. The hours following Anne's disappearance were filled with growing unease. A child, gone without explanation. How could a vibrant, familiar place become the last known sight of her? And why were there no witnesses, no screams, no struggle? For 25 years, these questions lingered, unanswered. And Gotlib was born on May 5, 1971, in the Soviet Union. Life there was not easy, and her family faced challenges that shaped their decision to leave. In 1980, Anne, her parents, and her older brother packed their lives into suitcases and left for the United States, searching for new opportunities and freedom. They settled in Louisville, Kentucky, where they began building a new chapter in their lives. Anne was only 9 years old when she arrived in America, but she adapted quickly. Her sharp mind and determination allowed her to master English while maintaining her fluency in Russian. Teachers described her as intelligent, eager to learn, and friendly. Her ability to connect with others, regardless of language barriers, made her stand out. She was the kind of child whose presence brought joy to those around her. The Gotlib family embraced their new home, settling into an apartment complex near the Bashford Manor Mall. The mall, a popular spot for families and teenagers alike, became a familiar place for Anne. She enjoyed visiting the stores, riding her red bicycle along the neighborhood streets, and spending time at the nearby playground. Louisville was her world now, and she moved through it with a sense of curiosity and innocence. At school, Anne thrived. She excelled in academics and was known for her kindness to classmates. Art was a favorite subject, and she spent hours sketching and coloring. She had dreams that matched her bright future. Her teachers remember her as someone who had the rare ability to balance being focused and playful. Outside of school, her time was filled with simple pleasures. She loved spending afternoons riding her bike, playing with friends, and enjoying ice cream on warm days. These were moments of childhood bliss that would later serve as haunting reminders of what was lost. June 1, 1983. And Gotlib set off on her red bicycle, the summer evening warm and inviting. Bashford Manor Mall, a familiar destination just across the street, was her destination. And had made this trip countless times, navigating the short distance between her family's apartment and the mall with ease. But that evening, something changed. Between 5:30 and 6 p.m., she was seen heading toward the mall. It was the last time anyone saw her. Hours passed, and the summer day gave way to night. Anne's parents waited for her to return, but the silence in their home grew louder as the minutes ticked by. Concerned, they began to search the neighborhood, calling out her name and retracing the path she would have taken. Each corner turned and every familiar spot searched brought no sign of Anne. Her red bicycle, however, was found. It leaned against the wall outside Bacon's department store, undisturbed, as if she had left it there only moments before. It stood as the only clue to her whereabouts. The sight of it was unsettling, a child's bike, left behind, its owner missing without explanation. Anne's parents searched the mall, moving quickly through its halls, hoping to see her familiar face. The stores were beginning to close for the evening, and the mall grew quieter. Each passing moment deepened their sense of unease. Shoppers, employees, and passers-by were asked if they had seen a young girl matching Anne's description. No one had. The simplicity of her disappearance was as haunting as the act itself. There was no struggle, no scattered belongings, no calls for help. The bike's presence offered no answers, only more questions. Why was it left there? What had caused Anne to vanish so suddenly? The lack of any sign or sound was chilling in its stillness. As the hours turned into late evening, her family's worry grew heavier. The street surrounding the mall, normally filled with children playing or neighbors chatting on porches, now felt empty. The air that had been warm and vibrant earlier in the day now carried an unsettling quiet. The path she had ridden so many times was scoured again and again, but there was no trace of Anne. With no clear sign of what had happened, law enforcement mobilized quickly, and the search began in earnest. Local police took initial control of the case, scouring the area around Bashford Manor Mall. The scope of the investigation expanded rapidly as concern mounted. Thousands of leads were followed. Calls came in from across Louisville, and tips from concerned residents were logged and meticulously reviewed. Officers canvassed neighborhoods and spoke to anyone who might have been in or near the mall during the critical hours. Despite the volume of information, no actionable evidence surfaced. It was as if Anne had simply disappeared into thin air. Early in the investigation, a police dog was brought in to track and scent. The dog followed a trail leading to a nearby apartment complex, stopping at the door of a unit belonging to the grandmother of the last person reportedly seen with Anne. This discovery raised immediate suspicion, and the location was thoroughly examined. The apartment, however, yielded no evidence. The lead was dismissed as an error, leaving investigators back where they started. In the absence of physical evidence, investigators were left to explore a range of theories. One idea suggested Anne had been abducted by the Soviet government. Given the Gotlib family's status as Soviet Jewish immigrants who had recently left their homeland, the theory proposed that her disappearance was part of a broader effort to force the family to return. Both the Gotlib family and the FBI dismissed this notion. There was no credible link to suggest such a scenario, but its persistence in public discourse reflected the desperation to make sense of the case. Another theory speculated that Anne had run away voluntarily. This idea, too, was quickly ruled out. Anne's family and friends described her as a happy, well-adjusted child who had shown no signs of distress or anxiety. She had left behind her belongings, including money and items she might have needed for an extended absence. The likelihood of her leaving without contacting her family or taking steps to sustain herself seemed implausible. As weeks turned into months, new possibilities continued to emerge. In 1990, a breakthrough appeared to be within reach when Michael Lee Lockhart, a Texas death row inmate, claimed responsibility for Anne's disappearance. He provided investigators with a detailed account of how he had killed her and even included a map showing where he had buried her body near Fort Knox. Despite the apparent specificity of his confession, a thorough search of the site revealed no physical evidence to support his claims. Lockhart's confession was ultimately dismissed as unreliable, another false lead in an increasingly frustrating investigation. Throughout the process, police faced growing challenges. The case attracted significant media attention, particularly in Louisville, where it became a fixture of local news coverage. While the exposure helped raise awareness, it also brought public scrutiny. The lack of progress became a source of frustration for both law enforcement and the Gotlib family, who endured years of uncertainty without answers. The investigators faced the daunting task of sifting through thousands of tips and questioning between 30 and 40 suspects over the years. Each potential lead was followed with diligence, but none produced the critical breakthrough they needed. The lack of physical evidence was a constant obstacle, leaving the investigation heavily reliant on witness accounts and circumstantial findings. The nature of the case added to its complexity. Anne had disappeared from a busy public space during daylight hours, yet no one had seen or heard anything that raised alarm. The mall's parking lot, where her bicycle had been found, offered no surveillance footage or concrete clues. Investigators were left with a single haunting image, the abandoned bike, and a mounting sense of frustration. In time, the investigation began to stall. Despite the exhaustive efforts of local police and federal agents, the case lacked the momentum needed to uncover what had happened. The Gotlib family continued to push for answers, their pain compounded by the passage of time and the lingering uncertainty. For years, the investigation remained open but stagnant, with little hope of resolution in sight. The haunting question remained: how could a 12-year-old girl vanish so completely, leaving no evidence behind? This was not just a case of a missing child, it was an enduring mystery that defied explanation, a puzzle that seemed destined to remain unsolved. As the years went by, the mystery surrounding Anne Gotlib's disappearance continued to haunt her family, the community, and law enforcement. By the early 1990s, the case had grown cold. Leads dried up, tips ceased to provide new information, and investigators found themselves with little to act upon. Yet, despite the lack of progress, Anne's story was far from forgotten. Her disappearance had left an indelible mark, sparking a national reckoning on how missing child cases were handled. The search for and exposed significant gaps in how law enforcement and communities approached cases involving missing children. At the time, there was no centralized system to track missing person reports across jurisdictions. Information was often siloed, making it difficult for investigators to connect dots between potential cases. Anne's case, along with other high-profile disappearances during that era, underscored the urgent need for a coordinated effort. In 1984, the creation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, represented a turning point. Anne's case became a key example of why such an organization was necessary. The NCMEC sought to bridge the gaps that had hampered investigations like hers, providing law enforcement with the tools and resources to respond more effectively. This new approach included developing a nationwide database of missing children, enabling authorities to share information quickly and efficiently. Public awareness campaigns also became a cornerstone of the NCMEC strategy. Before the 1980s, missing child cases rarely garnered sustained media attention. Conventional wisdom suggested that such efforts were unlikely to yield results, leading many families to feel isolated in their search for answers. Anne's case challenged that narrative. The extensive coverage of her disappearance, combined with the use of billboards and other outreach efforts, demonstrated the power of public engagement. The Gotlib family's perseverance and willingness to keep Anne's story in the spotlight inspired a shift in how these cases were approached. These changes extended beyond law enforcement. Community involvement in missing child cases increased significantly, with families, neighbors, and volunteers taking active roles in search efforts. The widespread adoption of techniques like distributing flyers and organizing community searches became standard practices, driven in part by lessons learned from cases like Anne's. Despite these advances, the passage of time weighed heavily on Anne's family. The hope for resolution never faded, but the reality of an unsolved case brought an enduring pain. Investigators revisited the case periodically, reviewing old evidence and re-examining witness statements, but the lack of new leads was a constant obstacle. The physical evidence available in 1983 remained limited, and the advancements in forensic science that would later revolutionize criminal investigations were still years away. The cold case status of Anne's disappearance did not mean inactivity. Behind the scenes, efforts to find answers persisted. Files on the case grew thicker, filled with notes from interviews, tips from the public, and reports from earlier investigative efforts. Each new generation of detectives who inherited the case approached it with fresh eyes, hoping to uncover a detail that had been missed. By the early 2000s, a renewed focus on cold cases brought new hope. Advances in technology, including the digitization of records and improvements in forensic techniques, offered possibilities that hadn't existed in the 1980s. The ability to cross-reference data more effectively and revisit old evidence with modern tools gave investigators a sense of cautious optimism. Though the case had not yet been solved, the possibility of a breakthrough was closer than ever. Anne's story also continued to resonate within the broader context of child safety. Programs like Code Adam, named after another high-profile missing child, were implemented in stores and malls nationwide, providing immediate protocols for locating children who might wander off or be in danger. These efforts were direct outcomes of the public's heightened awareness of cases like Anne's, where the simplicity of her disappearance underscored how quickly the unthinkable could happen. Throughout these years, Anne's family remained steadfast. They continued to share her story, keeping her memory alive and advocating for improved systems to prevent similar tragedies. Their dedication not only kept attention on Anne's case but also helped drive broader changes that benefited countless other families facing similar circumstances. Though the years stretched on without resolution, the foundation laid by Anne's case transformed how missing child investigations were conducted. The lessons learned and the innovations inspired by her disappearance created a legacy that extended far beyond Louisville. While her case remained unsolved for decades, it served as a constant reminder of the work that still needed to be done. On December 4, 2008, law enforcement revealed Gregory Oakley Jr. as the man they believed responsible for Anne Gotlib's disappearance. The announcement came decades after the investigation first pointed to him, marking a pivotal moment in a case that had haunted Louisville since 1983. Gregory Oakley Jr. was no ordinary suspect. A former veterinarian, he had access to drugs like Talwin, a potent painkiller used in his profession. Investigators believed he weaponized this access, using the drug as a means to control his victims. Oakley's criminal history was equally disturbing. He had been convicted of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old Louisville girl in a manner that bore unsettling similarities to Anne's case. The age of the victim, her red hair, and the calculated nature of the crime mirrored the circumstances surrounding Anne's disappearance. In the early stages of the investigation, Oakley was identified as a person of interest. In 1984, just a year after Anne vanished, he underwent a polygraph test as part of the inquiry. The results indicated deception, raising red flags about his possible involvement. However, despite these suspicions, investigators lacked the physical evidence necessary to move forward. Anne's disappearance left behind no witnesses, no DNA, and no concrete leads that could directly tie Oakley to the crime scene. Years later, during his incarceration for other offenses, Oakley reportedly confessed to a fellow inmate about his role in Anne's disappearance. According to this account, he described how he lured Anne, administered a lethal dose of toluene, and ended her life. The inmate's testimony provided chilling details that aligned with Oakley's professional background and established methods. The use of toluene, in particular, became a significant element of the narrative, connecting Oakley's access to veterinary drugs with the crime. The confession offered a plausible explanation, but it remained unverified. Investigators revisited old case files, searching for any overlooked evidence that might corroborate the inmate's claims. Despite their efforts, no new physical evidence emerged. Anne's body had never been recovered, and the lack of forensic connections between Oakley and the mall further complicated the case. Without these critical pieces, the confession stood as a key but insufficient element of the investigation. Oakley's history of targeting young girls added weight to the suspicions. His pattern of offenses revealed a calculated approach, often choosing victims in vulnerable settings. The parallels between his known crimes and the circumstances of Anne's disappearance were striking. Both cases involved young, red-haired girls in suburban environments where their crimes demonstrated a predator who carefully exploited opportunity and familiarity with his surroundings. Investigators believed Oakley's presence near Bashford Manor Mall on June 1, 1983, was likely. The mall's busy, open environment provided a setting where someone with his experience could blend in without drawing attention. It was a location frequented by families and children, making it an ideal spot for someone with his predatory tendencies to identify and approach potential targets. While no witnesses placed Oakley at the scene, his criminal history and the pattern of his offenses supported the theory that he had been observing the area that day. The reported confession from his fellow inmate provided additional disturbing insights. Oakley allegedly described luring Anne away from the public spaces around the mall and ensuring compliance by using toluene. His knowledge of the drug's effects and how to administer it without arousing suspicion aligned with his background as a veterinarian. This chilling detail connected his expertise directly to the crime, providing a method consistent with his documented behaviors in prior offenses. Yet, the lack of physical evidence to confirm the inmate's account remained a significant hurdle. The investigation into Oakley stalled further following his death in 2002. Released on a medical pardon due to declining health, he died shortly afterward in Alabama. His passing eliminated any possibility of direct questioning, leaving investigators reliant on the confession and circumstantial evidence to piece together what had happened. The opportunity to extract additional details or confront him with the existing findings was lost, creating a frustrating gap in the pursuit of justice. Despite these limitations, the decision to name Oakley publicly as the primary suspect in 2008 was grounded in the weight of evidence amassed over decades. His criminal record, combined with the specifics of his confession, created a compelling narrative. Investigators highlighted the consistent parallels between his actions and the circumstances of Anne's disappearance, emphasizing that his known methods fit the case too closely to ignore. The announcement also underscored the challenges faced by law enforcement in the absence of definitive proof. The lack of physical evidence, such as DNA or a body, meant the case could not progress to a formal resolution. Investigators remained confident in their conclusions, but the inability to close the case completely was a stark reminder of the limits of circumstantial evidence, no matter how compelling. Anne's story also influenced public awareness campaigns, which became a cornerstone of the NCMEC's approach. Before her disappearance, the use of media to publicize missing children was limited, with little understanding of its potential impact. Anne's case demonstrated the power of widespread outreach. Flyers featuring her image were distributed throughout Louisville and beyond, while local news outlets covered her disappearance extensively. These efforts, though unable to bring her home, underscored the importance of keeping missing children in the public eye. One of the most notable changes inspired by Anne's case was the development of community-based search methods. Local residents joined forces with law enforcement to distribute information, organize search parties, and raise awareness. These grassroots efforts became a model for future cases, proving that community involvement could play a crucial role in the search for missing children. Legislative advancements also followed, as policymakers recognized the need for stronger safeguards to protect vulnerable populations. Anne's disappearance, along with other cases from the early 1980s, influenced the passage of laws designed to address child safety. Programs like Code Adam, implemented in retail stores across the country, were established to provide immediate responses when children were reported missing in public spaces. These initiatives reflected lessons learned from cases like Anne's, where every minute counted in the search for answers. Anne's legacy extended into the realm of education, where her case became a teaching tool for law enforcement and child safety advocates. Training programs began incorporating scenarios based on her disappearance, helping officers develop strategies for investigating similar cases. The lessons learned from her story informed policies that prioritized the rapid dissemination of information and the use of technology to track and locate missing children. The influence of Anne's case was not limited to institutional changes. Her story served as a reminder of the vulnerability of children in seemingly safe environments. Families across the nation re-examined routines and safety measures, leading to a cultural shift in how parents monitored their children's activities. Discussions about stranger danger and personal safety became more prominent, driven in part by the visibility of Anne's case and others like it. The role of media in missing child cases also evolved, as Anne's disappearance highlighted the need for consistent and responsible coverage. News outlets began partnering with organizations like the NCMEC to amplify alerts and share updates with a broader audience. This collaboration ensured that cases received the attention they needed, increasing the likelihood of successful resolutions. Anne's story inspired technological innovations that transformed the way missing children are located. The use of Amber Alerts, though introduced years later, drew upon the lessons of early cases like hers. These alerts provided immediate, targeted notifications to communities, leveraging technology to mobilize the public in critical moments. The influence of her case on such advancements underscored the far-reaching impact of her disappearance. Child safety advocates often reference Anne's case as a pivotal moment in the national conversation about abduction prevention. Her story symbolizes the need for vigilance, community involvement, and systemic coordination in the fight against child exploitation. Interviews with advocates from the NCMEC frequently highlight how her case catalyzed change, serving as a wake-up call for a nation unprepared to address the complexities of missing child investigations. The community's response to Anne's disappearance demonstrated the power of collective action. Vigils, memorials, and public events kept her memory alive, reminding those involved in the case of their shared commitment to finding answers. These gatherings also reinforced the importance of maintaining hope, even in the face of prolonged uncertainty. While the mystery of Anne's fate remained unsolved, her legacy endured as a symbol of resilience and the ongoing fight for justice. Her story became a cornerstone for advancements in child safety, driving progress that continues to protect children today. The lessons learned from her disappearance have left an enduring mark on law enforcement practices, public policy, and societal awareness, ensuring that her impact will not be forgotten. Her red bicycle, left behind at the Bashford Manor Mall, remains a haunting image, an emblem of innocence interrupted. That small, silent detail holds the echoes of a larger tragedy, one that sparked decades of questions, relentless searching, and a yearning for justice. It is a reminder of how quickly safety can unravel, even in the most familiar of places. For Anne's family, the years have been filled with a mix of grief, frustration, and resilience. The public acknowledgement of Oakley as the prime suspect brought some clarity, but it was not the closure they needed. Without her remains or conclusive proof, the full truth remains just out of reach, leaving behind an ache that time cannot fully heal. Oakley's alleged confession to an inmate added a layer of specificity to the case, detailing a calculated method of abduction and the use of Tolwyn to ensure control. His words, while damning, could never be tested in court. With his death in 2002, the possibility of direct accountability vanished, robbing both investigators and the Gotlib family of answers that might have provided a semblance of resolution. Anne's case continues to resonate as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the hidden dangers that can exist in plain sight. It stands as a call to vigilance, compassion, and the need for collective action in protecting the vulnerable. What do you think? Should Oakley's confession have been enough to consider the case closed? Or does the lack of physical evidence leave too many unanswered questions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And Gotlib's story reminds us of the lives forever altered by tragedy and the tireless pursuit of answers in the face of unimaginable loss. Her disappearance left a profound mark, but her legacy endures as a symbol of hope and change. Thank you for joining us in exploring this case and keeping Anne's memory alive. If you found this story compelling, let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you help us shed light on more stories like Anne's and support efforts to raise awareness about unsolved cases and child safety. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.